I think we're going to start now. Bula and namaste, everyone. Hope everyone's well despite the challenges you face today. My name is Anju Mangal, and I work for the Alliance for Affordable Internet. It's an initiative of the World Wide Web Foundation. Welcome to today's knowledge sharing webinar. For newcomers, just for your information, Digital Empowerment Foundation and PICISOC in partnership with APC, APNIC, and A4AI is running the Meaningful Access with Community Network sessions till 4th December. So get your colleagues and friends to join the different sessions later. Today's topic is on gender-sensitive community networking. When we highlight the word gender, we have to realize that it's no longer just about two sexes, which is male and female. There are many different gender identities, which of course including male and female, but we've got transgender, gender neutral, non-binary, etc. And I've been told that there's more than around 60 gender identities. I could be wrong too. So keeping this in mind, we're going to talk about gender equity, which basically describes the process of being fair to both women and men, but also to other gender identities. So what does this mean in the context of ICT, technology, internet governance field, particularly for vulnerable communities and community networks? Today, we have an amazing and wonderful panelists who are going to highlight their stories about how to ensure fairness, how to look at strategies, and what measures we need to take to ensure that there's equity, which also leads to equality. So let me introduce you to our amazing and wonderful panelists who are busy connecting the unconnected. We've got Shalini, project officer for Janastu, India. She's also a computer scientist. We have Maureen, Hilyard, chair of the board of Asia and former board member of PICISOC. We have Sarbani, Belur, who is the Asia regional coordinator for APC, and also a senior research scientist in spoken tutorials with IIT Bombay. And we have Yumna Panday, who is the project support coordinator for Zenzeleni networks in South Africa. So before I hand over the mic to our incredible speakers, I want to invite the audience to use the Q&A to ask questions or even share your stories on this key topic. But feel free to use the forum during the discussions as well. So ladies, I hope you're ready to have a fun conversation about community networks and gender equity. My first question is to everyone. Shalini, we'll start with you. How can computer networks be used to promote gender equity, particularly for vulnerable parts of the community? And when we talk about community, please reference the different gender identities, and if possible, people in rural and remote communities, and also persons with disabilities, particularly the women who face challenges.
Yeah, thank you, Anju. Thank you for this question. My name is Shalini. How do I start? So we work. Sorry, I'm taking my time. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just going nervous now.
Don't worry, take your time. Do you want me to come back to you?
Yeah, I think it will be good, I think.
Okay, yeah. Sure, Shalini. We'll go to Sarbani. Maybe you can start with that question that I just asked.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Anju. And thank you, CNX, for inviting me to be a panelist in this session that I closely relate with in my day-to-day lives as well as in my work. In the community networks that I set up in the rural remote villages, what I find is that even if connectivity is enabled in such locations, men usually use the connectivity more often than the women. And the reason was very difficult to find out that why women use it so less. even though they have the phones with them. So the smartphones that the men in the household, there is actually, most of the times there is only one smartphone in the house. And when the men go to the field, which is around 8 in the morning, and they come back at 5 in the evening, so during the entire duration of time from 8 to 5, they are the ones, women are the ones who use they are the owners of the smartphone. But if you look into the times that they are using the smartphone, is when the time is during only 2 hours, between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. That's the time when they are using. So, so I went into a little more detail on understanding that why women use it so less. So one of the things is that women have to work on the household as well as outside work, both things together. But also digital literacy, they don't have they are not so tech savvy, so they don't know how to use the smartphone. Even they have told us that they do aspire to own a smartphone, but they don't buy a smartphone because they don't know no one is there to teach them how to operate it. Also, the other things that the women have mentioned is the location where the access points in the villages are located. When we put up and deploy the network, the access points that are usually put up in the villages are according to the not taking into consideration women's aspect. Like, for example, women came up to me and told that can you put up an access point near the well, for example, because the well is the location where women are drawing the water, and that's the place where they are interacting with each other. And so what happens is that then after it is dark, because these access points are located very far away from the homes, that women don't use it, because after dark they don't walk out of the houses. So we facilitated a location which is like a teacher's house residence, where women can go and be safe to use the connectivity. The other thing that women have also mentioned is that they have specifically mentioned that they want the connectivity for earning livelihoods. So income generation is one thing that they really want, because they really want to become economically empowered. Now, not that, of course, they are in dire situations over there where they work for manual laboring jobs. But most of the times they have mentioned that I know how to sew, I know how to embroider, I know how to make these certain things. Then why not I use that connectivity? So these are some of the things that these are some of the barriers, and these are some of the ways by which I have enabled women to become equal participants in the community.
Great, thank you, Sarbani. That's really good, particularly when you say that men use smartphones more than women. And in terms of deployment, that's interesting for me, because access point is critical, especially for women who are particularly around that area. So that's a really interesting point. And obviously connecting for earning livelihoods, I think that's a very good point that you've raised, and that's important in terms of not just for men, women, but also for other gender identities as well. So Maureen, let me go to you. Would you like to respond to that question as well?
Sure. I'll just turn on this video. Oops. Yeah. Hi everyone. In my role, I suppose I'm sort of bringing it from taking it from a Pacific perspective. My job, my day job, is really I'm a development consultant, so I spend quite a lot of time with communities, working with them on various activities, and so that although like within like in the Cook Islands where I am. There is a huge penetration of everyone's got a mobile. Okay, so mobile and internet connectivity isn't an issue. When it comes to community networks, however, because we're a small island, and I would say that this is pretty common within the Pacific, The community networks are generally related to what's happening in their, in their lives, in their village lives, in their schools. Like what is it that they're actually sort of like connected with, and these are really good building areas for that whole, sort of like future, sort of like connected, network connected, internet connected, sort of like development, and encouraging that kind of networking. Because within these little village community networks that they have, they're actually building skills, they're building confidence, they're actually learning to talk to each other, and most of these groups that actually are meeting together as a community are women. Like occasionally you'll get a few guys in there, but they're out working, being the breadwinner in most times. So it's generally the women, with children, or they get together. But I mean, it's still a grassroots growing activity, one in which they can learn to network in a comfortable environment, feeling, and building that confidence to actually sort of like be able to engage in other wider things that we will actually sort of like introduce with more connectivity within our islands. So that's just an introduction.
Great, thank you, Maureen. And I'm glad that you brought in the Pacific perspective, because it's very different from Asia itself in terms of community networks, but also connectivity with fixed line broadband as well. So I'm going to go to Yumna now. I'll just have one question for you. What are some of the things that need to be kept in mind from a gender sensitivity perspective when deploying community networks, and particularly the work that you're doing? Yumna?
Hi, you guys, just give me 1 second. They're just herding cows so it's going to be a bit noisy. Just for that, I'm actually in the village in Mankosi, where one of our networks. So my apologies for that. Sorry, can you just repeat please just repeat the question?
Yeah, so I wanted to know, based on the discussions we've had so far, what are some of the things that need to be kept in mind from a gender sensitivity perspective when deploying community networks? And when you're responding, if you could just use examples from South Africa or the work that you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, since coming from the city and moving to Mankosi, it was not just a culture shock in terms of culture, but also in terms of gender sensitivity. It's male and female. That's what it is. Yeah, there's nothing beyond that. The other terms are still very far-fetched, and slowly we'll get there. What I picked up is, what we take into consideration, what we have taken into consideration is very much a cultural aspect. Women here have the household activities, and that's it. Anything beyond that is seen as perhaps even a luxury, which is really frustrating if I look at it from my side, because when you come from, you sort of like, I wouldn't say equal, but you do what men do, or men do what women do. It's kind of like, this is unacceptable. But in the same context, you have to look at what's culturally acceptable and navigate around that, which can be very difficult. From our side, I think that we look at what the women are able to do while doing the activities. Funny enough, though, with us, I must add that most of the women here are very proactive. Like, seriously, the men would sit back in a way and let the women sort of like run things to an extent. And women are more, I'm not saying they are more savvy, but they sort of like latch on quicker, and they're more interested in what the network can do for them beyond just activities, just like, I won't say mundane activities, but I'll give you an example. We had a content challenge about 2 months ago, and most of the participants were women, and they promoted businesses, their own business. So that was very interesting, where the men would promote more like social activities, like they went fishing. They were very chilled. The women were focused on actually generating an income through the network, which we found quite interesting. Like most of the participants were like either hand sanitizers or masks or something related to COVID. So yeah, Thank you.
Thank you.
If that answers the question.
Yes, but I'm really interested because of the cultural aspect, because also there is a difference in the Pacific cultural context, also the Asia context. So I'm glad you brought that up in terms of, cultural. And I think, for that, it's also important to have digital skills. So I think that we'll come back to that. But I'm going to Shalini. Shalini, I hope you're ready.
Yes, yes, yeah. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
that's
ready.
fine. It's totally fine. Because you have a computer scientist, computer background, I think that it would be nice if you could give us some examples of how we can use the internet and online technologies to promote gender equity.
Yeah. So I I would like to start with saying that we are working with the girls from Uttar Pradesh.
Yep.
It's totally like a very rural. It's in a Mirzapur. It's a place where it's totally, there's no network, nothing. So we are trying to work with these young girls. It's aged between 18 to 25, and when we did the research, I mean, when we were introduced these girls, we were told like they are from like mostly backward people who don't, the girls who don't understand internet, who doesn't understand technology. So we had given like a lot of these ideas, but when we met them in person and when we started introducing technologies, I mean, basically like we work with mostly we believe in voice expression, how their voices can be heard. So we promote community radios across wherever we work. We try to like, the oral communication is more powerful than the textual or written formats. So like when we introduced the small radio gadgets to them, like they were so, I mean, we realized that they know so much. They can come forward and like express themselves. And slowly we started to build some a small device called Webinar Pi for their learning needs. And when we gave them a kit, basically like your laptop is actually fully equipped. I mean, you can just so we gave them like different parts like Raspberry Pi, mouse, keyboard, screens, different, and we just gave them and we wanted them to explore. And we were so amazed to know like, they like, I know this, I can like whatever you introduce, no, like I can do this, can I do this myself, I know this. They started to explore, no, like you have to just give them what, like you no need to judge them, like, no, I mean, because you are a woman or a female, I mean, you know only this, or you are specific to this particular thing. So if you just give them, they'll like do amazing things, is what I learned from my field experience with the girls and the women whoever I worked with. And the smartphones as well, like we always think like the women cannot handle, because like it's mostly men handle the smartphones and only they have it, one phone in the family. And women usually don't have smartphones with them, and they think like it's enough. No, it's what I mean, they have considered, what do you do with those phones, what you have to learn about, what will you do, you don't have anything, you go to the kitchen, all you have these things only, what will you do? That's what like both. But when we also gave, like we run a small handicraft center also in our community networks. So when we introduced the smartphones them initially, because they never used the smartphones, but initially it took some time to get adapt to the smartphones. But when we did it, like they started to conduct online sessions. I mean, look, sharing their designs, whatever they were doing. Like, can I contact the other person in some other village? Can I like talk to that lady wherever the training, the craft centers exhibitions happens, or like the new designs come out? Can we discuss it on the phone? And it was so amazing results that we saw when we introduced technology to them. And voice was like very strong when we introduced community radio, the radio gadgets, and it was like the outcome was very, I mean, so so good. Like, I mean, we were amazed to see that results. Yeah.
Great, that's good. You've already touched a bit on digital skills, and particularly for the group that you're working with, 18 to 25. I'm really glad that you're giving them a voice, and obviously they need to know how to use this technology. But some of them they don't, they already know. So I think it's also good for them to also teach other community members as well.
True.
But Shalini, did you come across any women with disabilities that were struggling in these communities?
uh See, what kind of disabilities you mean, like?
Anything for that matter. So persons who are visually impaired or hearing impaired, or even say someone who is on a wheelchair, but particularly I'm looking at, I mean, broad spectrum, because we have autism, we have dyslexia, but something that you came across in your community.
Not as a woman, but like we have in our team itself a male member who is physically challenged, who's on the wheelchair. But you know, you will be surprised to know that is a designer.
Okay, great.
And he whatever we do on our I mean, since we are from a technical background people, like he does all of this web designing parts, the front end designers, whatever the things that he does it. And I think like technology is not a barrier for any of these people. I mean, whoever there is visually impaired, whatever they are, like, I think you have to just expose to them, like, no need to judge anything, like, oh, what is this one? Right kind of devices, right kind of technology, if you just offer them, like, they are capable of doing it and able to adapt. That's what I feel like.
Great. Thank you so much for that, because we need to have an all-inclusive approach when we're talking about technologies and deploying technologies. Sarbani, I'm going to come back to you. I also asked Yumna this question, but keeping in mind from a gender sensitivity perspective, and because you've worked a lot in the communities and deployed community networks, what are some of the things that we need to keep in mind from your point of view?
Yeah, so one of the things, and I think one of the very foremost things we really need to keep in mind is that we should not thrust gender suddenly into a program on an inter-community network. It has to be an ongoing process. Like it should actually begin from when we think, or the community thinks that we have to set up a community network. I'm not even talking about an online community network. It can be an offline community network, a mesh network, any type of network. But in the starting, the very first meeting with the community should have a large number of women. I mean, and women actually don't come. You will not. You will be surprised that in the first meeting that we had with the community, there were only 3 women that had come for the meeting, and the rest of it was completely men. There were only 3 women, and the rest of it was men. There were around 25 men and only 3 women, and they never spoke a word. But immediately, and I was sitting in the front, I was introducing the project, and I was trying to tell them about the pros and cons. I was telling them so many things. And then one of the women came up to me after the meeting and told me that, and why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Because it will never happen. And I told that, no, it can happen. From this today, you all are 3 women who have come. In the next meeting, I will want to see 10 women coming here. And it was a process of initiation, that I had to go to their houses, talk to them, touch them, talk to them, hold their hands. Because, it is also that people come to them with when we are going for connectivity, connecting the unconnected. It is mostly a sort of an approach that we go from the urban areas, try to tell them that, oh, connectivity is very important for you, and then we just do that. But like, they have to be in that process. And yes, after that, we initiated the training with the DEF, Digital Empowerment Foundation, enabled that 3-day training for us, where the women were actually benefited a lot from that training. And women actually identified that what is going to be the network like, where are the access points, what is connectivity. And they also showed how the women can splice wires and the crimp wires, which was like, they achieved a lot. And that's when some of the women told that, yes, I have done ITI training on becoming an electrician. So I know how to crimp a wire. And then, she was teaching others. So such type of inclusion from the gender perspective needs to be there to make community networks all inclusive.
Great. That's a really good point, and I think this is good point for everyone, even policymakers, that we need to introduce this, and it's an ongoing process. So having that multi-stakeholder process is also good. Maureen, coming back to you, can you provide from a Pacific perspective? Maureen? Oh, we've lost Maureen.
Sorry, no, I'm here, just sort of trying to unmute myself and all that sort of stuff. I just wanted first, before I just wanted to get back to something that Yumna said about the women in the community and working together. What she did say about the influence that these women have within their community, and this is that strengthening of of their relationships and their confidence and that sort of stuff, in a natural environment, is really, really important, because they are very influential within the village structure. But what I also wanted to raise was from the perspective from the what's happening in the Pacific. For example, one of the really great things that we've recently established is the Women in ICT. That was a brilliant initiative initiated by the PICISOC board. But one of the things that was really, really great was that we got to sort of like meet people that you would not normally have met across the Pacific. And that's the fact that, if it was a face-to-face meeting, probably only a quarter of that group would have actually been able to attend that, because funding is never available to bring people together. And I think that if anything, we used the COVID situation where people, were sort of like, let's meet, let's, take this opportunity. And we really used it to our advantage by gathering people all connected with the internet, and they, range of skills and backgrounds, and it was absolutely superb. But I think that, in that sort of environment too, I mean, people, were, they were drawn into it. They sort of had to introduce themselves and tell each other about themselves. But it wasn't too long before the conversations were really going. And what really matters is that the person who's actually moderating that group is, it's got to have a good chair or a moderator who's inclusive, doesn't let any shrinking violet sit in the corner and not say anything, because even a name and where they come from is the start of a conversation. And that's what is really important about these community networks, because it's all about communication and talking to each other. Thank you.
That's a good point about communication, and obviously we need that support group, so women supporting women, and particularly what you brought up in terms of the Pacific Women and ICT. I think it's a great example. Yumna, I have a question which I will raise, because Osama has raised this on the chat forum, and after that we will go to the videos. But considering community network is community-based women, which should be automatic, equitable partners and participants, but that does not easily happen. So what can be done? Yumna?
Hi, thank you, Osama, for the question. It's a very good question. We're still trying to figure out what can actually be done, and I think it's an ongoing process. Well, I won't say as much ongoing, but a daily thought of, if you look at, use an example, I suppose Zenzeleni, in terms of what we are doing currently, is focusing on men earn more money because they have more opportunities. And that's just how it is, even to an extent where young boys in the area or young men, they have the opportunity to actually go and study and then come back and actually, make more money. And I use money in that context, generate income and sort of sustain their family. Whereas women, they're not able to do that. And what we try and do, we consider in the context, is that we create more opportunities for to actually go out and study. And I use education as an example, because it's the one thing in the village that is across genders. You have to go and study, and you have to come back, and you have to give back to your community. to some extent. And last 2018 or 2019, we had 12 participants that basically, well, not participants, but 12 students that enrolled, and most of them were women. And, you know, they were able to come back and sort of give back to the village, shall I say, or give back to the community. Whereas in the past, historically, men did that. So it sort of depends on where you are, but just make means or create opportunities for women as much as possible, but also navigate around what is culturally accepted or not. If that answers the question.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Yes, thank you so much for answering that question. We're going to go to videos now, videos from across the community network community, and then we're going to come back to question and answer, but also I'll give the panelists a chance to say a few words in terms of policies. So Shivangi.
Yes, we are ready with the videos.
Please go ahead. I think there's some problem.
Yeah, I think we're just there's some lag.
Sorry? Any questions?
I was keen on asking question to Sarbani especially because when she has worked a lot at the very deep of the tribal community. Is there some learning experience in terms of how something can be guided in terms of policy to include more equitable policy in terms of community networks? I mean, some kind of guiding example, because, you know, I don't know why all of us have been doing community network, but we have not been able to really drive it to be, away from patriarchal way of looking at it.
Thanks, Osama. Yes. Thanks, Osama, for your question. And actually, in the past few years, I have also been trying to understand that why women should actually be naturally be included in the community networks, because that's community based, where both men and women play an equal role. But what happens, what I saw is that most of the times when we are approaching the entire community, the explanation of connectivity and what connectivity can do to the community is mostly focused on men. And women don't want to understand what that network is, what are the devices, how the power can be, how the devices can be powered, and things of that sort. Women want to understand real life situations. Like, for example, women told me that can she get some information about health, because reproductive health, because she is not allowed to watch anything on her smartphone because her husband thinks that she is not a chaste woman. So certain of these things, like for example, financial inclusion, because there is a lot of issues regarding privacy and security. And what if a bank account gets hacked by someone and all the money goes off? She needs to understand. So her explanation has to be on the connectivity, has to be on those lines. And it is not on the lines of what the network can do. We also have, I also have faced this thing that in the tribal villages that I work with the tribal women, women want to be associated with the forest rights. Like, for example, biodiversity. which Ram Prasad will be talking about in the next session, that women want to be associated with that. Women have been doing all these activities and they want to be associated. If we can tell them that, oh, okay, you know about so much about the old trees, the fruits, the vegetables, and the seeds, the methods of preservation of seeds, then you can as well contribute by being connected through this network. And that's when we strike a chord with them. That yes, and the women feel that yes, even though I can be in my house, I can also contribute to the connectivity. So those are small attempts that I did, and the women are very happy in the communities that I serve. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Sarbani. And that's actually a learning process for me as well, because I wasn't familiar with the tribal community that you're working with. But thank you so much for those points. I'm going to go to Shivangi, if you can just play the video, and then we'll come back to question and answer. I see there are a few questions on the chat. Thanks.
Yes, yes.
No teníamos nada de internet, o sea, nada, ni conexión, no podías conectarte en el ordenador. Wifi.net nos trajeron la fibra óptica en el 2009, entonces ya mucha rapidez a la hora de conectar.
Imposible. Llegaba internet, pero súper lento, no podías. Ahora es perfecto la fibra, todo rápido, hemos mejorado en muchas cosas. Tenía que ir a Vic muchas veces y ahora lo puedes hacer por internet. Si tienes que ir al banco, transferencias, al gestor, correos electrónicos, yo muy bien. He tenido que aprender porque cuesta, pero sí, va bien.
A mi mujer, que es la que lleva un poco más la contabilidad y toda la gestión de la granja, esta sobre todo lo que ha cambiado mucho. Yo, básicamente por la gestión, con los cerdos, dudas, hablar con los técnicos, te envían correos, va todo muy rápido y es todo muy diferente. Te facilita mucho las cosas.
Pues estamos en la parte trasera de una granja que se ha habilitado una sala pues para gestionar todos estos usuarios de fibra óptica y enlaces con otros pueblos. Desde aquí dependen ya miles de conexiones. Los cientos de usuarios que hay de fibra y el resto de red de enlaces. Y desde aquí prácticamente se gestiona toda la comarca de Osona. Ahora hay alrededor de 200 casas conectadas por fibra. Y luego hay antenas en el tejado que son para la comunicación de radioenlace. Y estos son fibra óptica que tenemos hasta Barcelona.
Lo que estáis viendo al final es una arqueta en medio del pueblo de Gur, que es una zona rural. Por aquí debajo pasa la canalización del agua de boca, que lleva el agua hasta todas las casas, las masías rurales del municipio. A través de esta canalización lo que estamos haciendo es llevar la fibra óptica para que tengan mejor conectividad y que estén al nivel de conectividad de lo que puedan estar en zonas urbanas como Barcelona, Madrid y demás. Es la manera más económica que hemos encontrado para poder hacer llegar la fibra óptica a todas las casas que Telefónica y las compañías tradicionales de aquí de España no llegarían nunca porque no les sale a cuenta.
La gente pide soluciones, la solución privada no las da porque no hay rentabilidad económica y a partir de aquí es donde empieza el modelo de Wifi.net, que consiste en desplegar la fibra óptica simplemente un modelo colaboracionista, es decir, que se van sumando los esfuerzos individuales de todos los que invierten para poder disfrutar de una fibra y de una conexión de internet suficiente para los negocios.
La apuesta clara desde los ayuntamientos que hemos apostado por aquí ha sido invertir subvenciones que a veces podemos recibir para otras inversiones, como sea arreglar caminos rurales, asfaltar calles, destinarlo al despliegue de fibra óptica. Creemos que para un pueblo rural es imprescindible que llegue la banda ancha y por si no apostamos nosotros, sabemos que otros no lo harán.
El projecte va sorgir bàsicament per cobrir el dèficit de cobertura o d'ofertes per fer l'accés a internet al territori rural on estem ara, no? Que és a Osona, des de 2004 que s'està tirant infraestructura. I el projecte engega per la iniciativa privada d'una gent per solucionar-se uns problemes concrets. Evidentment, ells corren amb els costos del hardware o del maquinari que s'instal·la, també amb els costos de la instal·lació.
Os voy a explicar cómo se conecta un usuario a Wi-Fi-Net. Cuando surge alguna persona interesada, pide a ver si alguien le puede ayudar. Siempre hay gente dispuesta a ir con una antena y un portátil, se toman medidas, se ve si es posible instalar la antena. Hace falta comprar una antena pues como esta, se explica un poco al interesado la parte técnica. Compra el material, se le ayuda a instalarlo y ya está.
Es muy importante el hecho de destacar que en la economía colaborativa lo que necesitamos es que participen en ella los particulares, los voluntarios, la gente que se conecta, las administraciones, porque son las que también regulan y organizan el territorio y a la vez las empresas que están realizando esta economía colaborativa.
Extender el modelo a otras zonas de España, a otras zonas de Europa, también es un reto. Mantener el ecosistema que es colaborativo y en el que las inversiones se hacen en coordinación con otros pequeños operadores es también difícil.
This is our mast that covers Amra and Dakhil, and also we have to cover different points. What's our altitude? 2660. This is the positive current. It's my fault. Do you want some nuts? The speed at this link is 23. Slightly below. Rada, should I turn this around? Yes, slightly right. It will cover Chinga with Lipiter, it already covers Zangwa and Dakhil, and it will also cover Tani and Tangalovis. Gaga, do you want to remove it? Move it on the side.
Ellen thought I was coming back, asked if I was still in the mountains. I told her I was in Arkhad. No one believes that I'm calling them from this village. Everyone thinks that I left Arkhad and calling them from the road.
We Arkhatians are very happy and want to thank you guys for this happiness and thank you for sharing it with us.
Great, thank you so much for those videos. Suddenly my light switched off. I'm so sorry. These videos, obviously, I like the perspective that we're getting some important information from the communities on the ground, and particularly listening to their voices is very critical. So I think when we are doing any planning in terms of community networks or even technologies or deploying anything, we should keep the communities in mind. I see Maureen raising her hand, but there is a question for Maureen. How can we bring more Pacific women into, sorry, Achia has asked a question. How can we bring more Pacific women into tech? Because access to a device is still tough for them. That's a very good question about affordability. Maureen?
Yeah, it is good. It's a good question, and actually, I think if you came along to our Women in ICT, you would actually see that there are quite a few women who are actually already engaged in IT, and especially in the expert technical field. It's just that they're hard at work, and people just they're just walking alongside their colleagues. I guess it's sort of in some areas, there may not be huge groups, but I think within the Pacific, we're seeing it's a growth area, IT, because people in the Pacific know how important internet development is, and they're tending towards that. What I did also want to bring up was actually following on from what Sarbani had said. Sarbani had actually said about this village networking, it just reminded me. Very recently, we had a big community event, and our village head sent out an email to everyone in our village. And that included, who was going to be participating, and everyone had some kind of role. And it was really good. We had the MP of the area, the minister from the area, people who are growing, who are going to be contributing food, women's groups. The women organised it all. Okay, the women did all the organizing. So these little, this is where these little groups that are actually happening all around the place, when it comes to something big, they're really, really important. And this is that whole influence. So, and this is all done online. So there was a big email thread, and the whole organization of it was done together as a community group online. So it works.
Great. Thank you so much for that intervention, Maureen. Ritu, I'm going to get you to ask your question because I wasn't, it was a bit confusing. Can you ask your question, Ritu? Okay, Ritu's question is, why are we yet considering technology which is probably not meant for women when we are setting up the network? Yumna and maybe Shalini, you could respond. Yumna? Okay, Shalini, would you like to respond?
Yeah, okay. Let me read the question again. Why are we at considering technology is not meant for women when we are setting up the network? Uh, I think, I mean, when you okay, so I mean, I just want to like, I mean, I really feel that like women are judged. So I'll just give you a classic example of myself. I mean, it's not related to technology, but like, I'll just give you another example. When I was doing this learning the driving classes, I was taking the driving classes for my car. So my driver told me that women and car in the urban city, you just need to know like first gear and second gear is enough for you. Right? He just decided for me, like, that's all. Like, you need to know that and you will survive. You just need to survive there. Like, no, this is how, I mean, when you are there, like, I mean, if you are introduced to something new, like, they already judge, like, you will do I mean, you will ramp your car into somewhere or like may not drive properly, something like that. No, I consider as the same scenario happens in the community network also, like, because like the women are not exposed, they don't know, they were never taught or they were never given an opportunity to do these things. And when you don't include, when you're building the community network, when you don't include the women from the scratch, when you're doing it, I mean, from the planning, from like setting up whatever it is, if you don't include them, I mean, how can you expect, like, no, I mean, they they can create wonders, but you need to give them right opportunity, right? No, like, is I think that's uh, I think I hope I answered to Ritu's question, like, probably, like.
I like how you used a personal story to talk about gender stereotypes, and this is something that a lot of women face as well. So that's a good example. Thank you for that. And now I'm going to come back to policies as my last, because I don't see any more questions. So to everyone, a policy question would be, what would be your recommendation to ensure gender equity or gender responsiveness in, say, ICT policies or broadband strategies? Maybe we'll start with Sarbani.
Yes, thank you, Anju. According to me, I think the first thing is that in ICT policies that are being sort of developed, and we are talking about it, women are not included in the policy making itself. So it is the men who decide for the women, which is not the case. This should not be the case. We should actually, women can talk for themselves, and more women should be included. And I think more of field, when you are doing field deployments, when you're interacting with women in the field, that is when you get to understand their needs much more. Like now, we know that, yeah, it's a very general thing that men use the connectivity more than women. But if you go into the deeper things of understanding why women are not using the connectivity when they have the smartphone with them, when they have the connectivity, there is something wrong over there. So, and also we have, like what Yumna just mentioned and Maureen also talked about, is that we have to take into account the cultural aspects. Like in India, we talk about even in the villages, we have to bridge barriers of caste, class, which is not there in other contexts at all. So when such type of policies has to be incorporated or built for women, it has to be by the women. They have to be the major. I mean, more than 80% should be women because they will be talking, their voice will be heard, and that's how the policy can be done.
Great, thank you. Yumna, would you like to add?
Thank you. Just to go on what Shabani saying is definitely women should be from the onset. Women should be part of when you create the network, when you deploy the network, even in just like the research element of it, because it's men who actually go out and do the research and speak to men, shall I say, and women are like secondary. Oh, okay, what do you guys need? Okay, fine. Let's see if we can accommodate that. I'm not saying that happens everywhere, but from what we've picked up, I think in terms of policy recommendations, not to be gender specific, in South Africa in particular, there should definitely be a focus on finding ways to access spectrum. It's very tricky on our side. It's not gender specific. It's just we need spectrum so that people can be connected, and then from there we navigate around how women should actually, or women can be involved, and sort of from equality to equality eventually. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Maureen, would you like to add?
Thank you, Anju. Yes, from a development consultant point of view, I'm sort of like finding that donor funding applications, for example, insist on some inclusion of gender focus. So that's a given. But I'm also sort of finding that government policy is starting to include sort of like gender diversity and being more inclusive of women, and when they're actually looking at advertising positions, women and people with disabilities.
Thank you for that. That's a good point. And Shalini, would you like to add in terms of policy recommendations?
Yeah. So, when you are including the rural and indigenous people in the policy network, how do you think, like, what is the inclusiveness? What is the inclusive? How do you hear them? Like, so I would recommend, like, so the voice expression is what, like, because the history is like it's the oral tradition that we have been like following from, like the oral narratives. So the voice expression is the one that we have to include in the policy thing. Like, how do they express themselves? The freedom of expression, not put any barriers in them. Like, what's the history that they had carried from the past, and also the context. How do they get their content back? Is like one. I mean, if, internet is vast, right? So there are many contents in the net, in the internet, but like, how do the communities get their content back? Like, and if someone is posting something, what's the local context of it? How do you, so we name it as a re-narration. Like, how do you re-narrate the contents availability, or the voice itself, the voice recordings itself? How do you, like, bring back to the communities itself? So I think that's inclusion is very important. Like, voice expression is very important for the communities when we are including this rural. I mean, we have to keep that in mind, like, because we are working with these rural and indigenous people. What is best what will be the best for them. Like the content should be reachable and there should be an expression, I mean the freedom of expression, like in what forms they can express themselves or like do things is very important, is what I feel.
Great. Thank you, Shalini. I guess progress towards gender equality must be grounded in solutions that are led and owned by local stakeholders and respond to local realities. Because a lot of these policies are designed without the key voices. So I'm happy that all of you raised this important point. I'm going to give the floor to Osama. Osama, you have a very interesting question. I would say that everything is owned by females, of course, but I'm going to let you ask that question. Osama?
Hi, Anju.
You have a very interesting question, so please go ahead and ask.
Yeah, that's the reason I put it on chat so that I don't, disturb everyone. And it was more like the opinion. I basically I wanted to say that internet is wherever we go, it is built by men. The women participate at the decision of men, and so I had a very I belong to APC. APC has a movement called feminist internet. So I don't know. I was wondering whether internet itself is male or female.
That's an interesting question. So I'm gonna hand it over to maybe I think it's good. Yes, I see Yumna saying non-binary. So I'm gonna start with Yumna. Yumna?
Okay, I assumed that was gonna come to me. Well, it's a very good question. Actually, it's not something that I think I've ever thought about. And yes, I'm only coming into the space of a feminist internet in the last few months. I never understood any of this in terms of a feminist internet. Internet is just internet for me, and that's it. As long as I'm connected and nothing beyond that. So I think that as we move along, specific things on a very personal note for me, the content that I see people use locally is very how shall I say, for example, the Mail, as one of my colleagues is actually sitting right next to me and actually talking about this currently, is that the content that men actually use is to an extent sexist, and it's not protective of women. It's not respectful of women, and it's not because I'm going to use pornography as an example, sorry to say that, and it's not because he's disrespecting women, but that's the content that he wants to sort of view. So how do you sort of like navigate around that from a personal perspective, and what content is acceptable that develops a community, that develops women, that doesn't sort of objectify women, etc. So I'm going to go with non-binary, Osama, just to sort of keep it safe, and as we move along, we can decide in the next 10 years if it's whatever it is.
Great, Yumna, you touched on a really interesting point, but we're not going to discuss that because we've got only 2 minutes left. So I'm going to quickly ask Sarbani, Maureen, and Shalini, if you could just say a few words before we close the session.
I would like to say that internet is still connectivity, during connecting the unconnected. We are still not focusing on women's use of connectivity, and we should be using it more specifically for the usage by women, by the other genders that are there in the community, and I think that should be the focus of connectivity. Currently, connectivity is just thought of as some device that we are using, some smartphone through which we are connecting to the internet and watching whatever we are watching or whatever we are viewing. But I think when we make it very meaningful to the community, to the women, to the other genders, I think that's when we are bringing in inclusive connectivity.
Great, thanks. Maureen and then Shalini, 1 minute each, please.
Yeah, well, I would actually say that I agree with both Yumna and Sarbani. We need to ensure that there's always content that develops women online. You are not going to stop what others look at. Thank you.
That's good. Shalini?
Yeah, okay. So what I would like to say is, like, I mean, so my perspective is like, when because as being a technical person and things, so when you're working with, don't make it as a gender biased. It's, I mean, every person is capable of doing some or the other thing. You have to identify the right skills instead of thinking you're a man, woman, or whatever gender you are. No, like, I mean, internet is for everyone. The connectivity is for everyone. And I don't think like we should do this bias of, in the name of gender. And it's very important, like, everyone are included, and everyone, I mean, everyone are capable of doing some or the other things, and identifying the right skills and right opportunity, and this connectivity will be meaningful for everyone.
Great, thank you so much. Yumna, would you like to go ahead, or I can just wrap up? Okay, I'll wrap up. So thank you so much for this interesting discussion. Closing the growing gender digital devices is critical, especially to reducing inequality, and there's need to put the right policies into place and enabling, especially for women and particularly, you know, other gender identities, to access and empower through the web and internet. And as many of you have said already, having an inclusive process and being a voice is key. So please be the voice of your community. And like Shalini said, that internet is for everyone and there shouldn't be any bias. So we need to have everyone included in this. So I think on that note, I am going to say thank you so much for all your time. And we're going to now close the session.